going to hit start, and as soon as I hit start, and say
welcome to episode number 67 of Books and Brews. And so, Laura, what have you been doing this month?
We have been doing things that some people will object to strongly. How's that for a hook?
Now you have to explain yourself.
Right. A few months ago, we processed our first chickens, and this past month, we not only processed our first rabbits, I did something I thought I would never do. I arranged a play date for my rabbits with my friend's rabbits. And we were hoping that would result in some bunnies, but either she's having a very long gestation or she's just given birth since I was down there feeding them like 2 minutes ago, or it just didn't work this time. So
now we'll have to get back to our friends and have them buy us dinner. You know.
Family-friendly show. It was actually pretty funny. We put two of our does in with their buck, not together because that would be just wrong. But separately, and the second one wanted nothing to do with him, and he wanted nothing to do with her. So they just sat in their opposite corners and glared at each other and glared at me, and and we finally took pity and let them out. So other than that, we've been preparing for winter. I've been wrapping the barn. I have been building a new fence. I've been learning to do cement work, and I just came from the barn, which is why I'm wearing a hat, because I didn't have time to wash my hair and look decent. But it's my favorite hat, so that's okay.
There you go.
Anything exciting you had this month?
Well, tremendous amounts of work, which have kept me from the cement work and other things. I've also been rebuilding an old John Deere tractor and got many good things done with it, and then just now have an issue with the transaxle. So I've got fluid leaking all over the place, and I get to go fix that.
Yeah.
But so what have we read this month, Laura?
Well, I read the instructions on the cement bag. It's
true.
Not exactly a riveting plot or entertaining characters.
Something tells me you have something to say about rabbits again, though.
I do, yeah. So this is the other thing that we finished this month is my Cooking with Rabbit cookbook. And so I just ordered copies today, and we will be at the Southern Festival of Books in Nashville in a couple of weekends from now. And these should be available. They should have arrived by then. So if you would like to cook rabbit, make wonderful rabbit recipes, of which there's a huge variety, you should be there.
Yes, indeed. So I have to ask, do we have another interesting guest this month, Laura?
We do.
And who could it be?
I was very riveted by the plot of, is it your first book, your memoir?
Well, actually, it's probably about my 22nd book, but all the previous books were academic books.
Okay. So I was riveted. Our guest is Michael C. Keith, and I was riveted by his book because I have some very close friends, in fact, who changed my life for the better. And they used to hitchhike across the country, including with their infant son. And one of their sons later followed in their footsteps and ended up being in the news.
Kind of lost.
Yeah, he ended up having to be rescued. The weather changed very abruptly, and it's quite a dramatic story. However, we're here to talk about Michael C. Keith.
That's a great idea.
Michael is the author or co-author of more than 24 groundbreaking books on electronic media, including one chosen by President Clinton for his official summer reading list. Beyond that, he is the author of an acclaimed memoir, The Next Better Place, a young adult novel, and 27 short story collections. Short stories, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. His most recent books are, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right, Euphony. You got it right
Euphony.
The first
time.
Okay. The Loneliness Channel and Pings. Keith is a retired professor emeritus. It's emeritus, isn't it? I've done that twice today at Boston College. His work has been translated into numerous languages, and his website is at michaelckeith.com for more information. So, Michael, welcome to Books and Brews, number 67. Chris, I'm excited to try the drinks you picked out.
Yes, they should be a lot of fun
interesting.
today. So the first one we have for your hitchhiking and memoir type book is a cocktail called On the Road Again, which just seemed was going to be a great start. And so what we're going to be doing is starting with my favorite rye. I like to find excuses to use this. It's a Whistle Pig 10-year, and we're going to put an ounce and a half of that in a shaker, which means since I'm making 2 drinks, I will put twice that in there. Then we will knock over the shot glass. But after that, we'll put in some lemon juice, just about 3/4 of an ounce. Then for an interesting twist, we get to put in a 1/2 ounce of maple syrup, which is going to be fun inside this drink. And of course, I only use, very authentic 100% maple syrup from whatever state wants to give it to me. I always love Vermont syrup, but Wisconsin also makes very good syrup too.
Very good.
And then I have egg white. And this is kind of cool because what this is going to do in what's called a dry shake is give it a nice little kind of foamy mist on the top of the drink when we're done shaking it. So now we have this all in a shaker. And I will use this kind of very neat glass, a nice kind of cocktail glass. And we will pour out our On the Road Again. And here we go. So we have a bit of the foam on top.
Ooh.
Yeah,
And
if you can kind of see that. Yeah, and I wanted to have Willie Nelson On the Road Again queued up, but
you can add it to the soundtrack after.
I probably will. I was busy with rabbits. So cheers.
Looks delicious.
That's a very interesting combination. It's both
Yes.
a little bit tart, but a lot of sweet.
Yes, very,
It's
very good.
Very distinct, those opposite flavors.
And it certainly takes the kind of the hard edge off of the rye, which I really like by itself anyway, but many people don't. And yet you get the wonderful flavor of the rye in here without necessarily the sharpness.
Yeah.
So a very nice drink.
I really like that. I think it's a good thing we have some snacks to absorb the alcohol.
Yeah.
I'll probably be finishing this one. Michael, go ahead with reading number 1.
All right. This comes from my book, The Next Better Place. It's an account of my childhood with my alcoholic father as we gypsied across the country, hitchhiking for a dozen years. This is the preface. At dinner with friends a few years ago, the conversation turned to the subject of childhood memories. Most of the accounts had to do with joyful events, family outings, and holidays. Occasional stories about the loss of a grandparent or a pet were the exception. When it was my turn, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. Well, I didn't crap for nearly 2 years once, I declared. Now, that's a heartwarming recollection, quipped someone. It's true, I responded, adding that when you don't eat, so you're saying that you were starved as a child, interrupted the wife of a colleague, and you were kept in a windowless basement, right? Said her husband with a playful smirk. Just the opposite, I replied. I was free to roam the wide open spaces and go pretty much where I wanted. The problem was meals were few and far between. And this was because before long I was recounting life on the road with my father, including the fact that despite my now being an academic of some distinction, I hardly ever attended school, missing some grades entirely, and never reaching beyond the first weeks of high school. God, our childhoods were so boringly normal compared to yours, observed a friend. Don't complain, I answered. Normal is pretty good when you're a kid. That night, sleep was slow in coming, and when it did, it was anything but restful. My dream retraced the highways my father and I wandered in vain pursuit of our utopias. Who was it that said a normal childhood is not one worth living. I'd like to tell that person a story.
I expected you were going to go straight into the next. Our dog is barking and fussing, so I put it on mute.
Would you like me to go straight to it now?
Yeah, go
All
straight
right.
into the next one.
All right. This is a chapter called 42nd Street Aliens. It's about 38 pages into the book. The next day marks the 1st of June, and it continues to be unseasonably warm. Hotter than a hot point in hell, remarks Ray, whose plaid sport shirt is half tucked into his khaki Bermuda shorts. His summer wardrobe is highlighted by a pair of calf-high black army boots that he proudly claims were issued to him in World War II. I asked if he knew my father during the war. Didn't know your old man until after the war, he answers, and I tell him that my father was in a near-fatal Jeep accident chasing some Japs on icy roads in Alaska. Damn, Japs in Alaska? Didn't know they made it up that far, remarks Ray, shaking his head. That's how he hurt his back, I continued. He got an honorable discharge, too, keeps it in his wallet. Well, that's something, says Ray, appearing slightly impressed. Our plans for the day include a trip to an air-conditioned theater to see a movie of my choice. Ray is taking another day off from mental health reasons, he says, from mental health issues. Also, to my great grief and relief, is the absence of Mrs. Scanlon in the morning. The door to her room is tightly closed against the activities of the living world. Before noon, we're off to the subway. Ray is not bothering with his car because he says it's impossible to park in the theater district. My father is nowhere in sight, and when I ask Ray about his whereabouts, he says, my old man is in the bathroom. He's pulling latrine duty in apartment 257. Seeing that I don't understand, he adds that getting piss and poop stains out of porcelain is a challenging job. I get the picture and figure that this will probably put my father in a right frame of mind to hit the road the very next day. This thought heightens my spirits nearly to the boiling point. Finally, the highway and the mystical Rocky Mountains and painted desert comes to mind. These are places I've studied back home on my Rand McNally road map of the United States for the last several months in intense anticipation of this journey. You can edit that out. In the subway bound for 42nd Street, an old man wrapped in a torn and filthy overcoat and wearing newspapers for shoes is sprawled on the seat next to us. He seeks and reeks of alcohol and has vomited on the floor beneath him. Each time the crowded train lurches, the pink and yellow puddle shifts, forcing us to lift our feet to avoid being hit by it. Intermittently, the snoozing drunk mumbles profanities, which everyone within earshot does his best to ignore, but it's not easy. Now there's a guy who could use an AA meeting, remarks Ray, poking me with his heavy elbow. The first thing I notice when we surface from the train into Times Square is the exhaling billboard. I feel a certain connection with the smoky sign because my father's loyal use of the product it advertises. Ray jokes that the guy inside blowing those rings all day must have a worse hack than my old man. I doubt it. 42nd Street, which I had only caught a glimpse of on our trek to the Oxford Arms the day or two before, is an awesome sight. Movie-going is my father's favorite activity, so he beheld a dozen theater marquees in the space of a one-block radius was too much for him and me to process. It was just awe-striking. Ray instructs me to take my pick of a movie, and it's a hard decision. I would like to see the movie with the chariot race, the one that won the big Hollywood award, Bender, I think it was called, and can't figure out why, since it's the term my mother uses to describe what my father is doing when he is drinking. Ray clears up the confusion when I ask him about it. No, not Bender, Ben-Hur, he explains with a loud belly laugh. Ben-Hur is now playing, so it comes down to a Western with Rory Calhoun or a 3D movie about giant insects. We lean against Ben-Hur because Ray favors the sci-fi flick, saying he is not much on movies that have more cattle than people. That's okay with me because I like scary movies, although I'd like to see some Western landscape in Technicolor. We're handed our special 3D cardboard glasses by a heavy-set woman in the ticket booth, and we entered the dark and musty theater, choosing a seat as close to the screen as our 3D specs will allow. Too near to it, and the effect is lost. Before us, a spaceship hurls toward Earth to the accompaniment of eerie, high-pitched music that sends chills up my back. Despite the horror on the screen, I'm transported to a more wonderful place. All is right with the world in the cool, removed darkness of the movie theater. Movies are the refuge of my childhood, even ones about hideous creatures.
I really enjoyed that reading. And as I said before, I really enjoyed the idea of this book because of my friends' experiences, although when they went hitchhiking across the country, their son was an infant and they didn't do it for 12 years. So who was Ray?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have clarified that. We left Albany on the first leg of our trip and ended up in New York because he had a friend there that was a manager of an apartment building, and his name was Ray, and he gave us shelter for 2 or 3 days.
Okay. And so how did this entire thing come to be? You were living with your mother and sisters, and when you were 11, you hit the road with your dad.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Yeah. You know, my mother had a low-paying secretarial job, and she had my 2 sisters to take care of. And I wanted to be with my father because he was so kind of off track. And he talked to me so much about California and going to California. I was mesmerized by it. So I told my mother I'd like to go with my father. She was reluctant. She didn't want to give me over to him, but he assured her, Michael will be fine. I'll take care of him. We'll come back. It's summertime. He doesn't have school. So she very reluctantly turned me over to him. And like the next day, we were gone. We vanished. And
so a few days, the summer turned into 12 years. What did your mother do about that?
It turned into 12 years off and on because every so often we'd return and maybe I'd stay with my mother for a month, and then I'd see my father and he would, kind of seduce me with the idea of, let's go here. Come on, let's go there. To me, it was very attractive because with my miscreant father, I didn't have to go to school. I didn't have to take baths. There was no schedule. We were just gypsies roaming the United States.
And how did you end up from basically not going to school for most of 6 years to how did you even get into college to begin with?
Yeah, the last early school I had was the first few months of the 10th grade, but I managed to talk my father into signing me in the Army, and this is later on than the book is, and he did. And while I was in the Army, I managed to get my GED. And so when I got out of the Army, that got me into junior college, and I excelled in junior college, and then ended up at a 4-year university, and then ended up with a bachelor's, and then ultimately a master's, and then ultimately a Ph.D. So it was, an interesting flight from no school to a lot of school.
To a PhD, right? Basically
right.
skipping half of your elementary and high school
Yeah,
and then getting a
did,
PhD.
yeah.
That's amazing. So you kind of imply in this reading, at least in the preface, that we don't necessarily want to have an unusual childhood.
Yeah.
And yet it seems like you have many fond memories.
Well, I think for years I kind of resented my father for this bizarre childhood, but we had a lot of adventures on the road. We had a lot of laughter. We also had a lot of hardship, of hardship. So as I became an adult and kind of tried to right the boat and went to school and had a daughter and did the right thing with her, I'd reflect back on that time on the road, and doing the book really allowed me to look at it as objectively as you can. And I realized that while it was a rough childhood, and I was lucky, I climbed out of it. I think most people who knew me and knew what I was going through figured I'd go the direction my father went. But there was
that's what I would expect.
Yeah, there was something in me that kind of nudged me in another direction. I always say that my father was a great role model because he showed me exactly what not to do.
I have some people I say that about. But if you had some resentment later, it sounds like you chose to keep going back, but it sounds like you feel like he kind of spun a web and
I was 36 when he passed away. He was in his 40s when I was born, and he kept appearing wherever I was living, whatever college I was teaching at, and oftentimes in hardship and needing financial help, and I did that right to the end, even though I had a sense of hostility toward what he was doing, and that he couldn't kind of get his act together, which he never did.
I find that really interesting because the friends I mentioned who also did a lot of hitchhiking across the country, she had a similar parent who just, in fact, both her parents were like that, just flitted off to Costa Rica, I think it was, and flitted off here and there, and then would show up. Hi, I'm here to sleep on your couch for a few weeks and have some meals, and then would disappear again.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's amazing. I wonder if there's a connection to this whole hitchhiking thing and that mindset. I was curious, having traveled the country now, did you see pretty much all of this country, or did your dad focus on?
No, we went across the country a couple of times. We went from north to in New England to the tip of Florida. We were in the Midwest, the South, the West, and it was perpetual really for 12 years.
That's amazing.
Every few years we'd end up back here in New England where my mother was, and then I'd stay with her for a while, and then I was so kind of programmed to getting out there, Huck Finn mentality.
Yes.
Just, get out there and go, paint half the fence and leave.
Right. And having grown up in the Air Force, very different, obviously, than just being a nomad, but similar in that you see a lot of the country, you see a lot of the world. And I can tell you, moving to the South when I was 9, actually, we had lived in Virginia before that, but moving to the very, very deep South, Biloxi, Mississippi, when I was 9, it was culture shock. And my big story about that is when my best friend's mom's boyfriend took us out for ice cream, and I said, "Thank you." And she was absolutely appalled, and I couldn't figure out why. She said, "Thank you, what?" I said, "Thank you for the ice cream." And she was like, "Oh, thank you, sir." And she was genuinely just horrified. And in the North, of course, we don't tend to say ma'am and sir. No. But I'm curious, what things really jumped out to you? What surprised you as you traveled around the country and met other people, basically other cultures in your own country?
I think the thing that stands out in my mind is kind of how kind strangers were. I mean, we'd be standing on the road and someone would pick us up and they'd be curious about, well, what are you doing standing out here with an 8-year-old boy? My father was a great BSer, a great con man. He'd give him a story about it. Well, we're trying to get to Denver where I have a job and I'm going to send for my wife and my other 2 daughters, but we ran out of money, blah, blah. And there were occasions when these people who would pick us up would actually reach into their pocket and hand us cash and wish us the best of luck. And then my father discovered that going to church rectories were a good way to get shelter for the night, money for food. So he had a script all worked out where he would ring the door of the rectory and ask to see the minister or the priest. And invariably they'd come and they'd sit down and he'd give them the sob story. And he did that dozens of times, dozens and dozens of times. And there was never an occasion when we were turned away. Never,
I'm not surprised.
There were some very poor parishes that you could tell they had nothing. But even then he'd say, well, we don't have any money, but let me go in the kitchen. We'll make you sandwiches for the road and whatnot. And so, that was an eye opener for me, how kind established religion could be in that situation. And then, just, getting into town, and my father knew of the Salvation Army. He knew that they would take you in, and they always did, and they were always generous. To this day, if I give to any charity, I give to the Salvation Army. It's not because I'm connected with them, not at all, but I remember the kindness they gave us.
Right.
So I'll give back.
I have one final question before we go on to drink 2. Short answer. What do you think is the most beautiful place in America?
Ooh, boy, that, I'll tell you, the place that's my platonic ideal geographically is New Mexico. I just love New Mexico.
There is very stunning, unique scenery in New Mexico.
Yeah. But something, in all our travels, I found that there was always someplace that had its own beauty, its own, that's why this country is incredible to travel. That's why I love road trips.
Yes.
Something I don't think people do much anymore.
Well, I guess I wouldn't know, but that's a shame. I used to do a lot of driving across this country. I mean, I've been to every corner of it. And I was sad to see my red Kia Sedona go, because it had literally been to every corner of this country.
Good car.
So, yeah, we're ready for drink number 2.
So much.
Yes. This one is related to your insomnia work. And this drink
I'll
is
write
called,
this down.
Right. This drink is called the Tick of the Clock. And I was kind of struck by the 11:11 and all of that kind of a thing. So we're going to start with some ice and a couple of rocks glasses, because we're going to pour this cocktail over ice once it's done. And for a rocks glass, I have my official Kentucky Colonel. I don't know if you can quite see it there. You probably can't, but I'm a Kentucky Colonel, recently named.
Congratulations.
And we have official glassware. So then I need to put a few cubes in the shaker. And we're going to start with 1.5 ounces of tequila. And typically with this drink, you use a Blanco tequila, but I happen to like a Reposado tequila, and I like the just slightly additional flavor you get from it, rather than I think Blanco is not necessarily as flavorful in contributing to drinks. So there's 1.5 ounces of tequila, and then we get 1 ounce of lime juice, to throw in that, because what else would you do with tequila than add some lime? And then we actually get a fairly strong amount of bitters. Angostura bitters is going into this. And, rather than just a dash or two, we're actually putting in what amounts to a quarter teaspoon. And so that's a fair amount for bitters. And I'm going to shake that. One thing I could do with this drink is put some ginger syrup in the shaker. But since I didn't happen to have ginger syrup, I'm going to use a bit of ginger ale, which will give us that nice gingery flavor as well as a little bit of snap. I'm going to pour that into the glass to start. Then pour the mixed drink, our tequila and bitters and lime fun, and then just fill the glass a bit more with the ginger ale to give it that nice flavor. So here we have our tick of the clock in order to enjoy your work with. And as Laura comes back from filming the effort.
The cocktail cam. I'm the official cocktail cam girl.
Cheers.
I'm a little afraid with that much bitters in it.
This has got a neat flavor. All of those different flavors come together and add to one another. It's not like you can just go, oh, there's the lime or whatever. There's the ginger. They're producing a unique flavor all by themselves, I think. What do you think?
It's one of these that's kind of like, I don't really know what to think of it, but I want to keep tasting it to figure out what I think of it, if that makes sense. But it's not like some of the beers I had with Michael where
you had your IPA face.
Or like not the calamari, the Iko no Shiakara. Did I find
Ika no Shiakara?
Ika no Shiakara. And I had some beers like that where the first sip makes me go, that is really gross, but I kind of want some more, and I don't know why.
If you haven't had it, Iko no Shiakara is a fermented, malted, salted squid. It's kind of chemically cooked the way sauerbraten is, but instead with squid instead, and they slice it very, very thinly, and they have kind of extremely thinly sliced lemon peel along with the lemon fruit and cucumber. And so you take a bit of the lemon, a bit of the cucumber, and a bit of the squid, and it's one of those things. The first time you try it, you almost want to spit it out because the texture is so weird, and then you're like, "That's the neatest flavor in the universe." And so, you have some more, and then you can't stop eating it.
Right.
So it was a lot of fun.
So I would like to mention we do have our new Books and Brews mug. And this one has Chris's name on it, since Chris is now officially the normal host.
I was the abnormal host there for quite some time.
Right. So Michael did finally decide that he does have to step down. And we're hoping that he'll be back for a goodbye episode, but that day is not today. So go ahead with reading number 2.
All right. Thank you very much. This is from a book I did a few years ago from Madhouse Press. And it was inspired, I think, maybe obviously by my difficulty sleeping. And also the integers, the numbers 1111. I'm one of these people who keep seeing these numbers and have for 40 years. I'll randomly turn around, look at a clock, it'll be 11:11. I'll just see something up in front on the road. So this book contains several stories, but 11 of them are insomnia based stories.
Okay.
So I'll read the first one, Insomnia 11. He pushes her pillow to the far side of the bed, hoping she'll remain there for the night. He loves her, but he can't have her close to him if he expects to sleep. This is a recent situation, and he's at a loss as to why it's happening and what else he can do about it. She's a cuddler, and he's certain she'll feel rejected if he's unreceptive to her nightly approach. Yet he's desperate for sleep, so he'll do what he has to do. After a week of keeping her at a distance, she confronts him. "Why are you pushing me away? What's wrong?" she asks. "Nothing's wrong," he replies, but then comes clean. "I just can't have you near me in bed anymore." A long silence follows, during which he anticipates the worst. And then his wife says, "Oh, it's a phenophobia, hon. Don't worry. It's treatable with therapy."
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. Yeah,
Yeah.
all of these in here are short and sweet.
Now, the first thing that comes to mind, you already answered the questions I had, is this based on personal experience? I did want to ask, you have a couple of books titled Insomnia. I know there's Insomnia 7, Insomnia 11. Are there others titled that?
Not separate books. No.
Oh, okay.
This is in Insomnia 11, which indicates there's 11 stories within with the insomnia theme, but there's like 5 stories that aren't related to the insomnia theme between the insomnia stories, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I misunderstood when I was reading online about your work. I thought they were separate books.
Oh, I see.
But they're referring separate little stories. So is there a cure for this? Is there treatment?
There are many, I guess. I try a variety of different things. Probably the delicious drinks you've made would go a long way toward relaxing. Because the big thing is when you're about to go to bed, to feel relaxed, to feel relaxed, and not review all of the negative things in the world or what's happening where and whatnot, to try to think positive thoughts and try to blank your thoughts as best you can, because sleep wants to find you. But if you get all these roadblocks and obstructions because you're thinking about, oh, I should have done this today, or this politician's driving me crazy, or this or that, you're pushing it away. You're pushing it away. Now, there are certain things that you can try to enhance your ability to get to that point. Melatonin is good. Gummies are good. You go into a drugstore, there's 100 different little things that have to do with sleep and whatnot.
Nostrums.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
How long have you been dealing with insomnia? Since a very young age or middle age?
No. I think up until I was like in my 60s. My head would hit the pillow, and within 3 minutes, bam, I was gone, And then as I got older, as I reached into my septuagenarian era in years, maybe the body just naturally loses some of its capacity to get you to sleep. But then I was writing for a long time, a lot of stories that were maybe disturbing and tumultuous and dark in some respects and ironic. And I think I was bringing a lot of that stuff with me to bed. I'd spend half the day in these places in my stories. And so I think that contributed to it, And then when I retired, I didn't have the distraction or the fatigue that comes with going to work and dealing with things. So maybe I just wasn't as tired as I was then. So there's a number of factors.
Right.
In this.
And
it's not one simple thing.
Are you still struggling with insomnia, or have you found
off and on
that works? Okay.
I've kind of developed a routine, a technique, and then at the other end, it's a double whammy. You get to sleep, but then you wake up 4 hours into it, or 5 hours into it.
If you're lucky, or
if you're
2
lucky,
hours into it.
You got to go to the bathroom. And then the danger there is you get a little awake, and when you go lie down, you start opening the door to those thoughts again, So you got to start it all over again, you know.
Right. Well, I
So-
did find the subject interesting because I have struggled with insomnia for 20 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've talked about what you think is causing it for you. I believe there were events going on that were extremely stressful at the time, but I would have hoped that once those events stopped, that I would have been able to sleep again. And I'm sorry to say, I have tried everything. I have tried aromatherapy. I've tried gummies. I've tried melatonin. I've tried white noise. I've tried
Yeah.
everything anybody has ever recommended. And honestly, the only thing that works for me is red wine.
Well,
And
that's good. At least that works for you. And you know something, there's always something new
Mhm.
to distract you from sleep. There's always something going on or something to be worried about or someone that gets under your, there's always something.
Right.
you know.
Which says a lot about sometimes we do create our own problems.
Oh,
You know,
Almost always.
attitude is everything.
Yeah.
So
It
um,
is. It is.
I wanted to ask, how did you get from this very nomadic life into, then you went into college? How did you end up in communications and radio?
You know, that's a good question because when I was a kid, if we had anything to entertain ourselves with wherever we were, it was a radio.
Mhm.
It was a radio. And so that impressed me in the 50s and 60s as I was growing up. You know, I was so kind of connected with that. So I think somewhere along the line, I thought, oh, maybe that would be a good career. Maybe I should become a DJ or a radio announcer. And then I went in the military during the crazy Vietnam War, came back from Asia, and went directly into a broadcasting school, you know, one of those, you too can be a DJ school.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And it was only a less than a year course. And I got my first job in radio and stayed in radio for a dozen years.
Oh, that's very fascinating. What was your program about? Or did you have
Well, it
multiple
wasn't a
programs?
program per se. I worked for formatted stations. So
Mhm.
whatever their format was, I was adhering to that. If I worked for an easy listening radio station, an adult contemporary radio station, a beautiful music radio station, a middle of the road station, you know, you were told that's what you do between the music and whatnot. And then they give you liner cards and you read off the liner cards. So it wasn't a show per se. It might have been called something, but I was just there, you know,
Okay.
filling it, back timing the records, reading live commercials, and giving intros to the next segment of music.
I was always very inspired by Larry King in the 1970s.
Yeah,
Sacramento,
yeah.
you know, was one of
I-
my absolute favorites.
I met Larry King and spent a little time with Larry King, as a matter of fact. In fact, he blurbs The Next Better Place.
Oh, very cool.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's
As
wonderful.
a matter of fact, this is his blurb on the bottom of the front page.
Wow.
His, you know, the narratives that he had, the stories he told, and
Yeah.
how humorous they were. You know, you would just be busting a gut with everything that he said.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was really, really neat. It was, very inspirational.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where, you know, as a kid, I'm under the sheets with the flashlight listening to the radio.
he did that too. Yeah.
Yeah. We need to move on to drink number 3.
Awesome. And I just realized, so the tick of the clock was supposed to map to your story about time, and that the one that was related to insomnia, especially regarding the placement of the wife and the husband, is this third drink. So we'll just kind of, you know, reverse them a little here. But this drink is called Love and Fear. So I was trying to mix the idea, you know, of love and the phobia. And so, you know, here we have this kind of a drink instead. So there's a bit of a, you know, a temporal aspect to insomnia, of course, as there is from your direct observation of the clock, you know, as well. So I'm trying to do my best here, you know, mixing them.
Doing great.
Here we have, again, with Love and Fear, we're going to start with 1.5 ounces of gin. And typically, one of my favorite gins for mixing in any drink is Plymouth gin. It just is, it's a wonderful London dry gin. I just happen to have some, what you might call rail gin here, Seagram's, but it's good enough for a drink. Then we're going to get Aperol, or it's an aperitif. Aperol actually comes from a French slang word, apéro, which was a slur essentially of aperitif. And this is a wonderful liqueur, product of Italy, that has a number of different floral aspects to it. And we're going to put a half ounce of that in this drink. Then we will move to a half ounce of lemon juice. Trusty mixer for almost any beverage. We would normally in this drink try to get some pineapple syrup. And it's a particular kind of pineapple syrup that happens to have some elements of clove and other things in it, which is kind of neat, something you might find at a higher end bar. In this lower end bar, we're going to just use pineapple juice itself. And that'll give us enough of the pineapple. If I was able to browse the spice cabinet fast enough, I might have grabbed some clove just to throw a little bit in to see how that would go. And, then we're going to get, again, a bit more of bitters going into this. And I'll put it in the shot glass just to make sure I don't get too much. And now between the gin, the Aperol, the lemon, the pineapple, and the bitters, we have a Love and Fear. And I'm going to put this in a martini glass, which is a nice classic glass. And since we have the neat kind of color of the Aperol, it should give it a little bit of a nice, almost a bit of a tequila sunrise effect. And this is our Love and Fear, or the phobia.
Cheers. This one, I definitely taste the bitter.
Mm-hmm.
This is one with that interesting effect where you definitely taste one taste on the front of your tongue and something completely different on the back of your tongue. And there aren't many things that do that.
Right.
But I've come across a few, and this is one. It's got two completely different tastes as it goes down your tongue. So fascinating. And once again, this was for the previous reading.
Yes.
The phobia reading. The previous drink was for the one you're about to read, which is called 1111, correct?
Correct.
Go ahead.
Okay. That looks so delicious, those drinks.
I'm glad they do.
Ooh.
Like
Anyway.
I said, we'll be happy to send you the recipes.
Oh, would that I had one in front of me here. Okay, this is 1111, another short piece. The twin digits had first come to his attention a year ago when he'd encountered them on various devices 3 days running. After that, they popped up intermittently, often every few weeks. But now they were appearing with much greater regularity, at least once, and sometimes twice within a week. Recently, he'd come to suffuse them with special significance. It had to be more than sheer coincidence, he thought. His curiosity piquing, he questioned his friends and relatives and learned no one was having a similar experience. Finally, he went to the internet, where he found he was among a small group throughout the world who repeatedly happened upon the set of integers. While the mysterious phenomenon had proven an interesting distraction, it began to irritate him. Thus, he chose to ignore the iterations and did so without consequence for a time.
For a time. I love that ending. It's a little bit of an ambiguous ending.
Yeah.
Is it a play on words? Is it implying that all of a sudden something happened and he couldn't ignore it? I did want to give a pitch for our sponsor, Gabriel's Horn. They have their poetry anthologies. 2 more are coming out. We've got some historical fiction. This is about, a utopian society. It's based on an actual historical utopian society. This is a fascinating book, The Feet Say Run. I've got to get it to show. The Feet Say Run by Dan Blum. And it's about an old man trapped on a desert island with 6 other survivors. And it tells the story of his life on that island. And it also tells the story of his life in pre-Nazi Germany all the way forward to how he ends up where he is. We've got some short stories. We've got The Saint in the Cellar. You might recognize those names, so I'm a little biased. But we've got lots of books in almost every genre, so I hope people will check it out. And I'm curious, this phenomena of seeing the same number over and over, a lot of people believe there is some spiritual significance or, the universe telling you something, however you want to put it. Is that what you believe, or do you think it's just coincidence?
I'm not a terribly spiritual person, but I do question the frequency of seeing them. Then I did do some research, and I came away with feeling on the whole it was sort of a positive thing. It seemed to imply that something good was hovering around you or coming toward you. So I decided that why not just take it at that. Just when you see the numbers, just say, oh, that's a positive greeting. This is going to be a good day. And that, and that's what I do. And so the numbers have become something of a warm and fuzzy sort of manifestation that that I don't mind seeing.
Right.
Do
And
you think there's a numerological aspect to that too, by any chance?
Well, I'm not well versed in numerology, so I'm not sure. If I had gone deeper into it, I would have found it. But on the whole, and if you read a lot of my stuff, you'll come away with the conclusion that I'm a bit of a skeptic in almost everything. So for a long time, I was skeptical of that. I thought coincidence, but it happened with such frequency and such regularity. It was almost if it was laughing at me to think it was coincidence. Coincidence is one thing, but this seemed to go beyond that, So I accepted that, and I thought, well, make it a good thing.
as I talk to you more,
I'm sorry?
As I talk to you more and thinking about many of the pieces you wrote, in addition to what you've read here, are most of them autobiographical, just a few of them?
I would say it's a mix. The thoughts I have triggered by Lord knows what, I just walking with my dog, boom, boom, boom. And so, you can say everything you write is autobiographical, because it comes
to an extent,
right? But I don't set out to write a story about me in anything that I do, with the exception of the memoir. Right. But some pieces, like the one I read about, having a difficult time getting to sleep, that's closer to autobiographical than 90% of what's in the book.
Right. So your newest book is called Pings. I think that's the newest one.
Yes, it is. Hold the
awesome
Pigs.
Nice.
And it's published by Pierian Springs Press, a good publisher.
And all of the pieces in that are short. As I was going through it, I don't think any are more than 3 or 4 sentences.
You're right. In fact, I say that 3 or 4 lines, not even sentences, because 3 or 4 sentences can be a page, So these are typically from
especially if you're James Joyce, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So these are
This could be the whole book.
These are 3 or 4 lines, so very short. And that was the conceit or the concept of the book, to write 240 pieces, all of which are 1, 2, 3, 4 lines.
And why 240?
Well, that's what I ended up with.
Oh, okay. So you didn't set out.
Yeah, I could have gone to 500, but I don't think the publisher would have wanted it.
I didn't know if you meant the concept.
Oh, no,
was
no. Yeah, I see where you're
240.
going. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, no.
Page 75, number
Yeah,
right.
126.
So,
Yeah, it wasn't a conscious thing, you know.
right. No, literature and writing definitely goes through fads, just like anything. And I think maybe in the last 10 to 15 years, the fad has, I don't even want to say the fad, maybe the trend is a better word. There has been a trend toward things like flash fiction, or what you call, what do you call it? I've got the word here, nano,
or pings.
micro,
Pings is the
nanoscopic.
ultimate reduction of a story.
What is the purpose in making stories shorter and shorter? What is the benefit of that style of writing, or why do you do it?
Well, I do it because I feel that there's a way of expressing a universe in one line. You know, I think the challenge for me is always trying to say something that's poignant, that's provocative or evocative, and do it as succinctly as I can possibly do it. And
In
so,
an artistic sense, that might be the contrast between, say, a minimalism and a deconstructive approach.
yeah,
Or even if I could stretch that into a third dimension, would even be nihilist, you know, or something like that.
all of those, yeah.
So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, very valid, I think. And nihilist is a term I haven't thought about or used, but I think it's applicable.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we are unfortunately at the end of an hour already. Where can people find you online?
Right where you told them earlier, at michaelckeith.com.
Excellent. We've been drinking for an hour. They might not remember.
I'm going to start right now when we're done.
I'm glad we've inspired you to greatness, to higher, finer things
If
in
you
life.
choose to drink responsibly.
I think that's a good thing to add. The irony of this program is I don't even like beer, and I ended up doing books and brews, but it's been fun and very interesting. And I'm actually not that big into cocktails either, but it's always fun to learn these things and find out what's out there.
Laura, where
So-
can we find you?
You can find me at lauravosica.com. You can find us at booksandbrews.net. You can find us also at glenmerrillfarms.wordpress.com, because I didn't feel like paying for yet another site.
And there you can talk to sheep.
We got to spend our money on alcohol.
That's right. Yeah, that's very important.
You can find our sponsor at gabrielsornbooks.com. All of these are also on other social media, and anyone interested in being a sponsor, please contact us. And Michael, do you have any upcoming public events that people can attend?
Nothing this month. Things are being worked on in November.
Okay.
It'll be too early to give any dates about those things.
But those will be on your website if
They
people
will
want
be.
to keep
They'll
on
be-
top of that.
And
Okay.
on social media, Facebook and stuff, posting all of
Okay.
them.
Very
Excellent.
good. Laura, what are your and our upcoming events?
We will be at the Southern Festival of Books in Nashville on October 26th and 27th. And we will have the Cooking with Rabbit. We'll have a number of Gabriel's Horn Press books. We'll have all of my books, of course, the Time Travel series.
And a sackbut.
Yeah, I forgot. I haven't been bringing the sack butt lately.
You're cut off.
It's a medieval trombone.
It's a trombone. Yeah, yeah. We've had some very strange reactions. He had
Yes.
left me an email detailing what the electrician had to do because he was out of town. And at the bottom, it said something about, and the sack butt is in the corner. And I showed the email to the electrician rather than try and remember all this. And he looked at me very strangely and said, "Do I dare ask, what's a sack butt?" But it's just a medieval trombone with a very strange name. And yes, we usually bring the medieval dress, the medieval trombone, the medieval swords, a medieval helmet people can try on.
And our
So-
medieval dog.
Well, yeah, I don't think she can go to the book
Yeah, I
festival,
think
but I
she's going to
used
have
to take
troubles this
her.
year.
I used to take her.
Who do we have coming next month, Laura?
I thought you'd never ask. I'm so excited.
Laura is rarely excited, so yeah.
I'm usually very somber.
Yes.
Especially when I wake up in the morning and have to get out of bed. That's terrible. Speaking of insomnia,
Yeah.
next month I have a member of my historical novelists retweet group. So, we kind of retweet for each other. And JP Reedman lives in Wiltshire. I hope I pronounced that right, near Stonehenge. And we just had a really neat meme about how they changed the clock back an hour at daylight savings time at Stonehenge.
By putting all the liths in a trailer and moving them back an hour.
Back an hour. I'll have to put that up. So let me talk about JP Reedman.
You must. Right.
Born in Canada, she has had a lifelong interest in ancient and medieval history. So I am excited to talk to her about all the blood and bloodshed, death and bloodshed. I can't get my words out, and I really didn't have that much. And is often found lurking around prehistoric sites, ruined castles and abbeys, and interesting churches with camera in hand. She became a full-time writer in 2018. Her series include books about the Plantagenets, Bosworth, Medieval Babes, a set of standalone novels about lesser-known medieval queens and noblewomen. The Princess and the Police Station is about Anne Mowbray, and we'll talk about quite a bit more when she's here next month.
Very good.
So, yeah. Thank you for being on Books and Brews.
Cheers.
Cheers.
My pleasure.